A confession from the Kremlin. We all know Vladimir Putin, right? Tough guy, ex-KGB, rides horses shirtless. He projects an image of strength, of stoicism. Russia, under his leadership, doesn't admit weakness. But something strange happened in December of 2024. Putin, in a shocking turn of events, admitted that Russia's economy is facing some serious challenges. What could possibly lead this strongman to show vulnerability? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Could it be that the ghost of Donald Trump's presidency is still haunting the halls of the Kremlin? Did Trump's unconventional tactics and unpredictable nature somehow get under Putin's skin? Did the constant threat of sanctions and trade wars finally chip away at Russia's economic armor? Let's dive into the mystery. Russia has a long and storied history. From the Tsars to the Soviets, one theme has remained constant: strength. Admitting weakness is simply not in their DNA. Just think back to the Cold War. The Soviet Union, even when it was crumbling from within, projected an image of power and stability to the world. So, for Putin to come out and publicly acknowledge economic struggles, that's a big freaking deal. This isn't just some minor blip on the radar. It signals a potential shift in the tectonic plates of global power. Is the Russian bear finally showing signs of age? Is the Iron Curtain once more beginning to rust? The date was December 17, 2024. Putin, speaking at his annual press conference, addressed the nation. He spoke of economic headwinds, of challenges that needed to be addressed. This wasn't the usual chest-thumping, finger-pointing rhetoric we've come to expect. This was different. This was, dare I say it, humble? For those watching around the world, it was a moment of disbelief. Putin, the man who invaded Crimea, who stared down NATO, who seemed to revel in his role as a global antagonist, was admitting that things weren't exactly rosy back home. The world took notice. The markets took notice. And you can bet your bottom ruble that Donald Trump, from his golden throne in Mar-a-Lago, took notice. So, what exactly did Putin say? He admitted that Russia's economy was facing some, difficulties. Inflation, he conceded, was higher than expected. The economy was showing signs of overheating. And while GDP growth was projected, it was far from certain. These might sound like technical terms, but in the real world they translate to one thing: people feeling the pinch. The ruble had been steadily declining for months. Prices for basic goods were on the rise, and the average Russian citizen was starting to feel the squeeze. This wasn't the image of prosperity and strength that Putin had worked so hard to cultivate. This was starting to look like, well, a bit of a mess. In response to these mounting economic pressures, Russia's central bank took action. They did what central banks do in times of uncertainty. They raised interest rates. This was a gamble, a desperate attempt to cool down the overheated economy and tame inflation. Would it work? Only time would tell. But the interest rate hike was more than just an economic strategy. It was a public admission that things were not okay. It was a sign, perhaps, that the sanctions imposed by the West were starting to bite. It was a tacit acknowledgement that Russia's economy was not as immune to external pressures as Putin would have liked the world to believe. Let's be honest, there's a giant tusked elephant in the room that we haven't addressed yet: Ukraine. Russia's ongoing conflict in Ukraine has been a major drain on its resources, both financially and politically. The sanctions imposed by the West in response to the invasion have taken a toll. These sanctions, combined with the costs of maintaining a military presence in Ukraine, have put a strain on Russia's economy. It's impossible to separate Russia's internal economic woes from its external entanglements. The two are inextricably linked. So, we come back to our original question. Did Trump have something to do with Putin's surprising admission? It's impossible to say for sure, but one thing is clear. Trump's unpredictable foreign policy, his penchant for economic brinkmanship, and his constant threats of sanctions undoubtedly kept Putin on edge. Did this constant pressure create a sense of vulnerability, a crack in the armor of Russian stoicism? Did Trump, even in absentia, manage to rattle the cage of the Russian bear? It's a question that historians and political analysts will be debating for years to come. But one thing is certain: the world is watching, waiting to see what Putin's next move will be. And the stakes, as always, are incredibly high.